Now available in paperback and e-readers, Spellbound, a darker shade of black. Get your copy today at your favorite online bookseller. There's this big movement towards these thin and really light computers. Computers that weigh under 2 pounds. And in order to get these computers wafer thin and light, what companies are doing are stripping these computers of a lot of features. Now, the most egregious offender in this case is the Apple Corporation with its new MacBook 2016. And when I look at the MacBook Pro 2016, they pretty much took almost every feature out of this computer that every person could use. Most of the ports, such as the USB standard port, are gone. Most of the function keys have been replaced with some sort of light up bar. And when I look at this computer, it really is not a really good computer from my perspective as a professional writer. Now, the MacBook Pro is supposed to be professionals, but there are none of the ports that I need to do my work. Now, I take photographs with a digital camera, and oftentimes I use the SD card slot to upload the photos onto my computer. Unfortunately, that port is now gone on the 2016 MacBook Pro, as is the USB ports and the network port. All of them have been replaced with some sort of Thunderbolt 3 or whatever it is port. And this port is supposed to be, you have to buy a $79 adapter just to use things like a digital camera or a printer. And that's kind of ridiculous, especially when you think about the price of this new 2016 MacBook Pro, which starts at $1,500. And that's just really, again, it doesn't really help for you as an end user. This is a really expensive computer, and then a lot of the features have been stripped from this computer. However, the really worst thing about this is when it comes time to do any sort of mods or upgrades, because when I look at this thin and light, especially a lot of these thin and light computers like your 2016 MacBook Pro, they're thin and light, but the disadvantages come when you're trying to mod them out. Like if you want to replace the hard drive, or if you run into a serious problem where the computer winds up having a breakdown. Now, if you don't have an extended warranty like the Apple Care, you're going to be in trouble, because you're going to now have a $1,500 paperweight. Because when it comes down to these thin and light computers, everything is pretty much soldered to the motherboard. And with everything soldered to the motherboard, you can't swap out parts if they become defective. Now, on older computers like the 2011 MacBook Pro I own right now and making this video from, you can pretty much, take this computer, turn it over, unscrew all the screws, take the bottom off, and then take out something like a hard drive that's not working, or replace the memory and upgrade the memory. And that's very advantageous to the end user, because what happens in that case is if you have a defect or an issue with a certain product or a certain internal component, that component can be replaced. And that's essential for any sort of IT technician, because it's a lot cheaper to replace a bad piece of memory or a bad hard drive than to replace the entire motherboard, because replacing a motherboard can really get expensive. And replacing motherboards is a major challenge, especially on something like an Apple computer, because when you're trying to replace that motherboard, there's a lot of intricate components and a lot of wires on the Apple that are a lot more complex than on a PC. On a PC, these thin and light ones also, you have problems when everything is soldered to the motherboard. And when everything is soldered to that motherboard, again, you pretty much are going to have problems replacing that motherboard. A lot of people think this computer is going to last a long time, but the average shelf life of a computer is anywhere from 3 to 6 years, depending on how hard you use it, and maybe even 8 years if you use it extremely light, if the operating system and stuff don't go through. Now, the other disadvantage of these thin and light computers also has to do with the repair issues as related to software. And if you have, let's say, a virus, or you have a major error in your system, what happens is you have to try to do a partition and a format. And if you don't have your CDs, this becomes a major challenge. And with the new Apple MacBook Pros, where they just literally took off the USB ports and then you have to buy this adapter, this really becomes a serious problem, because if your operating system winds up crashing, then you have no way of doing what many of us technicians do, which is called a partition and a format. And in a partition and a format, we go out of the way of wiping the old hard drive and then reinstalling all the software to get the computer back up and running. And that's the only way you can really fix a computer with a major software issue, or if it has a virus which has pretty much corrupted the system. Now, the other issue related to software relates to the information on your computer. And if all your information is on a computer where all the hard drives and the memory and everything is soldered to the motherboard, that means if that computer breaks, you've lost all your information. And in the old days, we would use something like this right here to take the hard drive out and then place it in one of these, or place it on on a ribbon cable and with a USB port attached, which the new MacBooks don't have. And we would take all your information and we would transfer it to the new computer. Same thing you would do with a network cable. And this is what we would use to take all your information off your old computer. But when I look at the 2016 MacBook Pro and I look at the lack of ports, there's no way for a technician to get your information off that old computer. Same thing with other thin and light computers. You wind up with a computer that's, again, basically a paperweight. And the reason why it's a paperweight is because, yes, it's thin and light and you can carry it everywhere, but if it breaks, all your information is pretty much lost forever. And a lot of people are looking at these, MacBook Pros and other thin and light computers from other computer makers, and they're thinking it's light and easy to carry, but they're not looking at the disadvantages of having one of these machines long term. When I look at these machines, they don't have a lot of advantages, and because they don't have a lot of advantages, I really wouldn't pick it up, because you really want a computer with, again, internal parts that can be separated, because when you separate it, it's cheaper to repair and it's easier to repair. Any IT technician will tell you you really want to buy things with separate parts, because it's cheaper to take a computer apart and take the separate parts out and replace the separate parts than to go in and replace that whole motherboard, because that motherboard is going to cost you a lot of money. And with the motherboard and everything soldered together, you're really looking at some serious costs. And when I was looking at, your MacBook Pro 2016, I was looking at that one, I was saying to myself, them removing the function keys, again, works really against them, especially when you're working with software and you're having a serious issue, or you're working with a website with a serious issue. Whenever you get a spinning pinwheel of death, back with the older MacBooks, what you could do was force quit. And I don't see a way to force quit because you don't have any function keys. And also, when you're working with different web browsers like Google Chrome or even their Safari, and you get a pop-up window, you used to use the escape key. And thanks to that new bar, you don't have an escape key anymore, nor do you have function keys that will help you when you wind up in one of those spinning pinwheels. Now, I look at this again. These thin and light computers. Yes, it's thin, it's lightweight. Yes, you can put it in a purse or a backpack, and it's not a lot of weight. But what's going to weigh heavy on you again are the problems you're going to have later on, especially if this computer breaks. If this computer breaks and you take it to a repair shop, you're looking at a bill that may cost you as much as a brand new computer. That's all I have to say for this video. You can comment, rate, and subscribe.